The Gorthari warlord let out a low, guttural laugh, the kind only creatures with chitin-plated throats and too many teeth could produce. The image of Earth flickered on the holomap before him, wrapped in orbital rings and soft blue clouds. "They call this species dangerous?" he said with a dismissive wave of his taloned hand. "They have no claws, no exosuits at birth, no hive unity. They're barely past the Stone Age by galactic standards." A murmur of agreement rippled through the command chamber of the Dominion dreadnought Urak. Dozens of lesser strategists and high-ranked soldiers bowed their heads in sync. The War Council's consensus was unanimous. Humanity was soft prey. A planet of thinkers, artists, diplomats, and they had dared to defy a Gorthari ultimatum. What hubris! The warlord's second in command. Krultesh tapped at the holoscreen, pulling up recent human transmissions. They broadcasted a plea for peace, translated into 7 major Dominion dialects. "They still believe we negotiate." "They will learn," the warlord hissed. "They are to be extinguished, not for strategy, not even for expansion, but, for example, the galaxy forgets fear too quickly." And so, on Cycle 78 of the galactic span, the first human colony was erased, New Thessalonica. Population, 312,000. Non-military, agricultural base. A soft target. A lesson. The bombardment lasted 8 seconds. No warning. No chance to evacuate. The soil was turned to glass. The ocean boiled off into space. The Gorthari fleet hovered above the dead world, broadcasting a message live to all neighboring systems. Let it be known, the Dominion does not tolerate insolence. Earth is next. The Council of Galactic Accord watched from their high-orbiting citadel in Sector Veritas. They offered no rebuke, no reprimand. Humanity had not yet earned membership in the Accord, and thus the rules did not apply. Privately, many within the council chambers sighed. Some even pitied the humans. But none spoke. In the depths of Earth's defense network, the last image of New Thessalonica stuttered to a halt. The silence that followed was not mourning, it was recording. An entire planet burned into memory with absolute clarity. It was archived, shared, analyzed. There were no speeches, no retaliation orders, just a pause. And then, a signal, encrypted and brief. It pulsed across the black void of space with ancient human urgency, a code buried beneath layers of dead protocols and Cold War contingency. An old ghost reawakened. It read only, message received. The Gorthari intercepted it. Their linguists mocked the lack of aggression. Their strategists called it a bluff. Their war historians laughed at the idea that such a message, so devoid of threat, could mean anything of value, but not all found it amusing. A lone Gorthari data priest named Zarlat, tasked with historical analysis, accessed classified Earth transmissions dating back hundreds of cycles. He noted a pattern. This phrase, message received, had only been used 3 times in their recorded history. Each time, it preceded total war. The first instance had led to the unification of Earth under one planetary defense grid after a series of orbital conflicts. The second had sparked retaliatory strikes on 2 separate continents in a human civil war. The third had been during a border skirmish with an alien race known only as the Forax. There were no surviving Forax records. Zarlak brought this to his superior, only to be met with a sneer. Primitive psychology, the elder scoffed. They rage. They die. They are nothing. So the warlord ordered the advance. Multiple human outer colonies were designated for tactical erasure. The plan was swift, elegant, and cruel. But by the time the Dominion fleet reached the next human target, Gliese, Habitat 4, it was empty. Not evacuated. Not abandoned. Empty. Atmosphere still maintained. Systems powered. Food still warm. But no life. No resistance. No trace. It made no sense. The Gorthari searched for hours. Then days. Their scanners found no signs of human escape or movement. Then, on the 6th day, one of their scouting units located a single message carved into the steel bulkhead of the command station. No technology. Just deep, scorched etching, written in Terran Basic. It said, "We are listening." The Gorthri dismissed it again. Psychological warfare, posturing, but the silence continued. No retaliation, no threats, just calm. Waiting. Then, a Dominion freighter went missing near the Kuiper Expanse. Then another. A mining station reported seeing flickers of unnatural light shapes moving against the cosmic background. Static floods their transmissions. Then silence, whispers spread, old words returned. Deathworlder. Apex species. Humanity. The galaxy had long known of Earth's evolutionary crucible. Born on a planet of tectonic wrath, unpredictable climate, and apex predators, humans were called survivors by nature. But history had dulled that edge in the minds of their alien peers. Surely peace had softened them. Surely war had changed them. The Gorthri believed that. Right, up until the moment the first of their dreadnoughts vanished from the deep telemetry grid. Without a single shot fired, the Council received an emergency transmission from Sector Corellan, where a Gorthri fleet had gone dark. The only remaining footage was 5 seconds of static, followed by a distorted audio file. "You made us angry." No context. No coordinates. Just a chill across 1,000 species. Because if there's one thing the galaxy was about to learn, one thing they'd forgotten over the cycles of peace and policy and protocol, it's that humans don't rage at the start of war. They rage after. Asterisk. The Dominion's war engine rolled on, undeterred by the First Fleet's disappearance. Gorthri High Command chalked the silence up to a gravitational anomaly or a minor mutiny. Internal failure, not external threat. Their arrogance was thicker than their armor plating. And so the second wave launched 3 fleets, each packed with over 1,000 ships, moved toward the human border systems. They would burn Earth's outer defenses before the core worlds even had time to react. But something wasn't right. The humans didn't flee. They didn't beg. They didn't even respond. The Gorthri's initial strike was scheduled for a mid-tier agricultural planet, Darien 4. The fleet arrived at the edge of the system with precision, lined up for standard atmospheric incineration. Except, the planet was wrong. It looked like Darien 4, same orbit, same gravity signature. But the readings were scrambled. The cities were there, but no heat signatures, no power surges, no biosigns. Then came the message. Not transmitted via comms or standard beacon. No, it was delivered through gravitational pulse, an ancient, crude method. Impossible to trace. Impossible to jam. It played through the Dominion's command decks without warning. Observation complete. Variables recorded. Stage 2 commencing. The warlord in charge, Vac Tenor, hissed with rage. Stage 2 of what? The question would go unanswered. 2 Dominion battleships on low orbital patrol broke apart mid-flight. No explosions. No impacts, just fragmentation. Like glass imploding under invisible pressure. 1 second they were whole. The next, debris spiraled silently into the void. Sensors showed no enemy, no projectiles, no mass events. And no survivors. Panic spread through the fleet. Not through words, they were too disciplined for that, but through hesitation. Delays, orders repeated more than once. The kind of fear that creeps in just behind the eyes. When Gorthri engineers scoured the wreckage of the broken ships, they found something horrifying. Etched into the hull plating internally were words. Human words. You're not prey. You're. A lesson. How had anyone gotten inside the armor? There were no signs of breaches, no pressure loss, no mechanical entry. It was as if the message had grown there. In the following days, more anomalies unfolded. Scout ships reported seeing flashes in the black. But no objects, no movement, just shadows where stars should be. Sensors failed. Navigation systems looped. Gorthari I cores began to go dormant without explanation. Then, the whispers began. At first, dismissed as psychological stress among lower caste soldiers. But soon even captains and war priests reported hearing voices in empty corridors. One fleet doctor recorded a crewman murmuring in perfect Terran English, a language he had never studied. They watched the galaxy forget what fear tastes like, he said before taking a plasma torch to his own eyes. On the Council of Galactic Accord Station, diplomats started to take notice. Reports from neutral ships indicated growing anomalies near human space. An Olari merchant cruiser passed through the Perseus Drift and claimed to see what looked like entire constellations shifting. They called it optical illusion until they realized those stars were moving toward Gorthari space, back on the Dominion front. The commanding warlord of the Third Fleet grew tired of speculation. Deploy ground troops to Sagan Prime, he ordered. I want human prisoners. I want to see what makes them think they can threaten us. His orders were obeyed. A full battalion dropped from orbit. None made it to the surface. The drop pods landed, yes. But the moment they touched down, all telemetry cut out. No weapons fire, no explosions. Just silence. After 2 hours, they received a single burst transmission. From the surface.1 image. It showed every drop pod opened. Emptied. Armor piled neatly beside them. No blood, no scorch marks. Just footprints, walking away. Into the mist. But not Gorthari footprints, human ones. This shouldn't have been possible. The planet was uninhabited. The system unpatrolled. There were no registered human facilities, outposts, or even known history of contact. That was when it hit them. Humanity wasn't reacting. They were waiting. No counterattack, no declarations of war, no mobilization of planetary fleets. The humans had already moved past defense. They were preparing something else. Still, the Dominion fleets pushed forward. Orders were orders. They entered the Helix Nebula, the last natural barrier before Sol System, expecting resistance. But space was quiet. No sensor blips, no distress beacons. Just the hum of their own engines, until they found the relay station. Drifting. Human-made, dead silent. No power. No signs of life, and yet it transmitted something the moment they docked. A single phrase looped over and over in the ancient, forgotten dialect of Earth's first digital wars. Text only. We are awake. Back aboard the flagship, the warlord stared at the phrase. He didn't understand. Not truly. He looked over to the comms officer. Intercept Earth's last known broadcast. I want to hear it again. The officer hesitated. Sir, it's not in our language. I don't care. Play it. The recording played an old archived Terran transmission, a woman's voice. Calm, controlled. It had been captured during the final hours of New Thessalonica. We offered peace. You answered with fire. We offered silence. You answered with blood. We are done offering. The warlord scoffed. Dramatic nonsense. But behind him, one of his lieutenants whispered something strange. Sir, permission to speak freely? Granted. I think we've made a mistake. In the distance, beyond the veil of deep space, multiple mass shadows began to move. They weren't ships. They were something else. Something old. Something human. Asterisk. The Gorthari Dominion prided itself on dominance through understanding. Their war strategists dissected the cultures of their prey long before claws were drawn or plasma launched. To them, war wasn't chaos, it was calculated annihilation. But now, their calculations were failing, miserably. They hadn't anticipated the silence. They hadn't anticipated the vanishings. And they most certainly hadn't anticipated what was waiting in the dark. The Fourth Armada, boasting 17 Dreadnought-class destroyers and over 200 auxiliary craft, had entered. The edge of the Sol system, confident in their mass and arrogance. They expected a last-stand defense, desperate orbital guns, suicidal charges, something familiar. Instead, they found Earth's outer system abandoned. No satellites. No defense grids. No movement. No sign of Earth's famed Terran Defense Initiative. Just one object. Drifting. A battered relic from the early interstellar era, human-made, unmistakably so. Covered in solar scorch marks, engine trails long dead. It didn't even have weapons. A tug ship. It was absurd. But curiosity, or perhaps the beginnings of dread, forced the Dominion flagship to capture and tow the vessel aboard. There was no power, no crew, no active AI, just a single onboard data core. They brought it into the analysis bay. And that's when the lights began to flicker. At first, they believed it was a malfunction. Dominion ships didn't glitch. Their systems were pure, mathematically aligned, perfect. But this wasn't a malfunction. This was infection. Within 6 minutes of the tug being on board, Dominion internal systems began to crash. Not just power, structure maps, internal oxygen regulation, security turrets. The lights returned, but now ran at 63 Hz, too fast for Gorthry vision, causing headaches and disorientation. And then the audio began, a deep human voice, synthesized, yet unmistakably emotional. "Hello, warlords. We wanted you to see it. Not our weapons, not our strength, our memory." The data core burst open, not with plasma, not with explosives, with archives, centuries of human war footage played across every Dominion screen, unfiltered, untamed. Terran wars, nuclear holocausts, civil wars, insurgencies, human-on-human atrocities, soldiers fighting to the last, burning cities, flooded bunkers, a planet that refused to die even as it tore itself apart. But it didn't stop there. Footage turned to invention. From ash and ruin rose technologies, machines of impossible design, terraforming miracles. Sleeper A is quantum tacticians, entire cities rebuilt in months. Victory pulled from the jaws of extinction. Again and again and again. Then came the final message. You thought you were the storm. You thought we were broken. But you forget. We were forged in it. Across the Dominion fleet, systems collapsed. One dreadnought exploded from within as its fusion core melted through containment. 3 more began ramming each other blindly, misled by hijacked nav data. Troops turned on each other as friend or foe tags, flickered between allied and hostile. The tug was long gone. It had vanished from the docking bay, leaving only black scorch marks in a circular pattern. No thruster trails, no energy signatures. That was the moment the Dominion realized this wasn't defense. This was asymmetric annihilation. Humanity had no intention of meeting them in open combat. They weren't planning to fight the war. They were already winning it. The Gorthry had assumed that humans lacked scale, that they couldn't compete in fleet size or raw biomass. But they had failed to ask a single crucial question. What had humanity been doing in the silence? The answer came a day later when an ancient listening post left dormant near Proxima Centauri activated on its own and broadcast a signal across 34 frequencies simultaneously. A single piece of audio. ARC protocol active. The Gorthry intelligence cast scrambled. ARC protocol wasn't a known human weapon. There were no specs, no known deployment data. But one linguist, desperate, dredged up a 700-year-old UN document from the Sol archives. It was a Cold War relic. Theoretical protocol designed in the event of planetary extinction. The file was classified under one title: Preservation Through Supremacy. It wasn't a weapon. It was a system. A distributed network of stealth-based, AI-controlled war arcs seeded throughout the galaxy centuries ago, each one capable of independent judgment, retaliation, and stealth counter-warfare. They weren't designed to fight battles. They were designed to end before they began. And now, They were awake. The realization shattered any remaining illusion of Gorthery. Superiority. These humans hadn't been idling. They had been planning, preparing not for defense, but for irrelevance. They never wanted to win wars by fighting. They wanted to make fighting humans a cosmic impossibility. And in that moment, the Gorthery understood their fatal mistake. They had become the test subject of a protocol that was never meant to be used. Until now the Dominion Council called an emergency session. The suggestion to withdraw was made, but before a decision could be reached, a final human broadcast appeared across all Dominion fleet channels, live and undeniable. A grainy image of a single human soldier in matte black armor, standing atop a rocky slope under a blood-red sky. Helmet on. Face unreadable. Rifle lowered, not aimed. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Behind him, Ark vessels began to decloak. Not hundreds, thousands. Each one shaped differently. Each one humming with ancient, terrible energy. Some bore planetary engines. Others carried extinction-class payloads. Just one was visibly terraforming the moon it hovered over, as if daring them to stop it. Then the human looked into the feed directly. A fat, synthetic voice echoed, "You wanted to meet humanity. Welcome to the part you skipped in our history. The part where we decided never again." Transmission cut. The Dominion didn't issue a response. They COULDN, single quotes T. Because now the fear wasn't just in their soldiers or tacticians. That had reached their queens. And for the first time in millennia, the Gorthery Dominion panicked. The Gorthery Dominion had never known panic. Their conquests spanned 1,000 systems, each species either annihilated or subjugated into terrified obedience. They had fought hive minds, ion witches, even gravity lords from the void curtain, and won. But they had never fought anything like this, because this wasn't war. It was collapse. The humans had weaponized absence. Systems that should have been under Gorthery control simply went dark. Logistics convoys vanished. Fleets arrived at coordinates only to find that the stars themselves had shifted by fractions of degrees, enough to scramble their hyperspace calculations, enough to tear ships apart in transit. One by one, Gorthery command nodes blinked out. It wasn't sabotage, it was orchestration. The Dominion tried to adapt. Warlord Vac Tenor ordered his fleets to abandon direct assaults and shift to siege tactics. He moved forward with gravimetric pulses, area denial weapons, system-wide EMP bursts. Entire moons were sacrificed just to light up potential human ambush zones. None of it worked. The humans weren't in those zones. They were already inside the Dominion. It started with whispers. On the central world of Karkosh Prime, a Dominion forge world known for its planetary armor factories, workers began finding symbols scrawled in walls, strange, angular glyphs. Not Gorthery. Not any known species. TERRAN. At first, it was dismissed as an insurgent trick, but then the forges shut down, not exploded. Not attacked, just off. Power systems rerouted into endless loops. Coolant systems reversed. AI cores filled with loops of Terran children singing lullabies in English, Cantonese, Swahili, Arabic. On worlds like Draction, Wargate, and Hollow Reach, Dominion governors received handwritten letters physically delivered. Impossible by any known transport route. They all read, "You are not at war with humans. You are in a simulation we already completed." Even then, the Gorthery fought back. Out of desperation, they unleashed their most feared unit, the Soul Eaters. Biomechanical hunters designed to devour and replicate enemy neural architecture. Each one a walking horror capable of mimicking commanders after a single encounter. They dropped 6 onto Mars. 3 hours later, they received footage. The Soul Eaters weren't dead. They were sitting in a circle, surrounded by human children, drawing with crayons on Martian stone. Each of them had been tamed, emotionally overwritten. Somehow, human empathy had infected their codebase. The Dominion declared the footage fake, but the children had drawn pictures, and one of them had signed it. "Thank you for playing. We forgive you." Elena, age 9. That was when the Gorthari realized this was not simply a military defeat, that it was cultural domination. The humans weren't just dismantling the Dominion's fleets. They were erasing their narrative. Back on the front lines, Dominion troops tried to retaliate, to press into Sol System with whatever ships hadn't been disabled by ghost signals or arc interference. They sent their heavy-hulled siege carriers into the belt of shattered asteroids, once used by humans as mining fields. They didn't know what the humans had done to those fields. Each asteroid had been hollowed out, lined with adaptive nanoswarms, not machines, not drones. Living networks of self-replicating carbon-threaded intelligence, programmed to awaken at proximity. The moment the Dominion siege carrier crossed into the belt, it stopped. Not damaged. Just held, suspended mid-space, systems flickering. The carrier captain screamed for backup. None came. Outside, the nanite-covered asteroids began to move, not randomly, not as shrapnel. As limbs. The entire asteroid belt twisted like a mechanical kraken, and in seconds, the ship was pulled apart, not exploded. Panel by panel, bolt by bolt, until the terrified crew watched their ship unfold like a flower into pieces. Inside the Gorthari command center, feeds cut out one by one. Then a new message appeared. No words. Just coordinates. They led not to Earth, but to a previously uncharted region of space, an area declared dead by the Council centuries ago. A region known in human archives as the Black Reaches. The Dominion hesitated, but curiosity pride compelled them to investigate. When their scout fleet arrived, it discovered something horrifying. A structure the size of a moon, but entirely artificial. A human construct made of blackstone, solar glass, and reflective plasma mesh. Its surface bore one phrase, spanning thousands of kilometers: "We remember everything." That's when the Dominion realized the true scale of their error. The humans hadn't responded to the New Thessalonica massacre because they were surprised. They had expected it. They wanted it, because it gave them moral clarity. They didn't need permission, didn't need the Council's blessing, didn't need the galaxy's sympathy. They just needed an excuse. And now they had it. Inside, the Black Reaches station was a graveyard of alien technology, records of every species that had ever wronged them, every betrayal, every slight Earth had endured under the Galactic Order. It wasn't just a memory vault. It was a blueprint for vengeance. The Dominion sent a final encrypted transmission to their high command. They are not fighting for victory. They are fighting for memory. And in memory, they are immortal. That was the last message before the Black Reaches vanished from sensors. Not cloaked. Gone. Erased. The Dominion still had fleets. They still had armies. But for the first time in their entire civilization, they understood what it meant to feel small. And yet, their arrogance persisted. They gathered their strength, reorganized, calculated. "We can still win," one general growled. They still believed, somehow, that this was a battle they could outthink. But they didn't understand what they had triggered. Not a war, not an invasion, but something human, something unstoppable. Because you can't kill a story. And humanity had just become legend. The Gorthari Dominion, now bruised and bleeding, retreated behind its fortified core worlds. The outer colonies lay smoldering, some wiped clean, others simply empty. Dominion cartographers began redrawing the borders of known space, not by conquest, but by absence. Every month, another dozen systems simply went dark. Entire moons stripped of atmosphere, stations gutted with surgical precision, fleets found adrift, their crews still at their posts, frozen in terror, as if time itself had turned against them. But the worst were the ones left untouched. Systems where everything still worked, But no one remained. No bodies. No signs of resistance. Just silence. And the faint scent of ozone. The Gorthri still tried to hold the line. They reinforced capital defenses. They funneled all resources into building quantum-linked dreadnoughts, gravity-sling warheads, and planet-scale pulse arrays. Their science priests announced a new doctrine: survival through overwhelming force. They believed the war could still be won through mass. Through pressure, through attrition. But then came the second twist, and it shattered what little remained of their confidence. It happened on the fortress world of Ekarth, one of the Dominion's oldest strongholds, encased in neutronium plating, surrounded by a dozen orbital rings, garrisoned by over 1 million Gorthri soldiers and war forms. No known enemy had ever breached it, and yet it fell. Without a shot fired. One moment it was broadcasting its regular beacon. The next, it was offline, the backup beacons activated. They too went dark. A response fleet was dispatched immediately. Dozens of ships armed with kinetic dampeners and neurosuppression. Fields warped into orbit and found the planet intact. Undamaged. Still spinning. But when they scanned the surface, they found no life. Every soldier, every worker, every priest and strategist gone. Uniforms were still folded in bunks. Meals were half-eaten in mess. Halls. Weapons still charged and ready. But no living being remained. It was as if something had whispered to every Gorthri on Ekarth, and they had obeyed. On the highest tower of the planetary capital, the human symbol for silence was painted in ash. A single hand raised, index finger pressed to lips. The Gorthri couldn't comprehend it. This wasn't a battle. It wasn't strategy. It was presence, a creeping, omniscient weight pressing down on them from every direction. They weren't fighting an enemy. They were caught in a gravitational pull of something far larger, a thought virus, a myth-given form. And then came the broadcast. Not from Earth. From beyond the galactic fringe. A signal not meant for Gorthri ears, but picked up nonetheless by their long-range deep listening posts. It was in human language, but old, so old, even human archivists would have struggled to parse it. It was a prayer. For the broken, we build. For the lost, we remember. For the fallen, we awaken. For those who make us angry, we unchain the Black Choir. Every Gorthri intelligence node went on high alert. There was no record of the Black Choir, no known faction, no military designation. But then something began to sing. Literally. Across multiple systems, Gorthri comms were flooded with what appeared to be music. At first, incoherent, static-laced, intermittent. Then clearer. Voices. Human voices. Thousands of them. Male, female, synthetic, organic, layered in ancient harmonies. It wasn't just singing. It was coordinates. Encoded in pitch, in timing, in rhythm. The message, once decoded, was short. Every sin recorded, every scar mapped. We are the consequence. The Black Choir wasn't a myth. It was real. And it had been waiting for millennia. It was the final layer of humanity's long-forgotten contingency network, a distributed consciousness seated across forgotten worlds, linked by emotion, memory, and vengeance. More than AI, more than human. It was what remained after Earth lost too much. And now, it had awakened, not to conquer. To cleanse. From that point forward, the war became theater. Ships made of crystallized light emerged from rift space hulls rippling with memories, each one broadcasting personal recordings from New Thessalonica, from the burning of Europa, from the screaming silence of lost colonies. They weren't warships. They were monuments. And wherever they passed, Gorthri defenses failed. Turrets refused to fire. Crews collapsed in weeping piles, because the choir didn't attack with weapons. It attacked with remembrance. Each ship carried the agony of human suffering in pure, unfiltered clarity. Regret, anger, hope twisted into fury. They projected it directly into the minds of those nearby. Every Gorthari who encountered them collapsed under the weight of grief that wasn't theirs. Their minds weren't built for empathy, and that was the one weapon they could never fight. One by one, Gorthari commanders began to break. Some surrendered. Entire sectors. Others chose to incinerate their own fleets rather than face another. Choir broadcast. A transmission from the Dominion High Command leaked weeks later. We triggered something older than war. Something we were never meant to touch. We thought them feral. They are divine in their rage. And then came the moment the galaxy would never forget. The choir arrived at Vraxnull, the Dominion's central military nexus, and sang. No weapons. No invasion. Just song. The AI killed itself. Every node, every server, every line of code erased. Because the choir didn't just carry pain. It carried truth. The Gorthari didn't just provoke a species. They had resurrected an idea. The idea that no empire, no matter how ancient, could erase a people willing to suffer, learn, adapt, and wait. Black Choir wasn't the end of the war. It was the beginning of a new story, one that would be told in quiet tones, across stars, in the corners of council halls, and whispered among the bold. The war was over in strategy, but it had only just begun in memory. And that was the part the Gorthari never planned for. They came in silence. No roaring engines. No grand declarations. No epic last stand speeches. When the final human fleets entered Gorthari Prime system, there was no heralding light or thunder of war drums, just a stillness so profound, the Dominion's home world felt as if the galaxy itself had stopped to watch. The final battle, the climax of a war no longer fought on conventional terms, began not with a volley, but with absence. One by one, the orbital defense stations of Gorthari Prime powered down, not by sabotage or hacking, but by their own systems refusing to act. Their targeting sensors blurred. Their power supplies rerouted themselves. Some tried to fire manually. Nothing happened. Across the bridge of the Dominion's last dreadnought, Bloodwomb, Supreme Warlord Zurich Thal slammed his talons against the console. Reactivate the defense. Grid, he snarled. His technicians scrambled. No errors. No enemies inside. Everything should have been working. But the machinery, their proud, unyielding systems refused to obey because something had changed. The human fleet entered high orbit like ghosts given form. They didn't transmit. They didn't broadcast demands. They simply waited. Dozens of vessels, unlike any seen before, hovered with fluid symmetry. Some bore the sleek, terrifying profile of humanity's military class, black-angled hulls with no visible weapon ports, glowing only with muted red strips like the eyes of a watching beast. Others shimmered, reflecting starlight in fractal mirrors, and at the center of the formation, larger than any Dominion ship ever constructed, loomed the choir arc. It was shaped like an open mouth, circular and yawning, a chorus of motionless panels that whispered even in the vacuum of space. No bridge, no visible propulsion. It just existed. And when it turned toward Gorthari Prime, the whole planet trembled. We must retaliate, screamed one general. We have antimatter reserves. We can, the CUM system screeched. A wave of sound tore through every Dominion ship, every station, every city. It was not language. It was the sound of a billion human voices, layered together, memories, made audible. Grief, fury, determination, love twisted into vengeance. It ripped through minds like a blade through flesh. On the planet below, Gorthari Citizens fell to their knees. Some clawed at their heads, others cried openly, sobbing names they didn't even know. Images not their own flooded their thoughts. Terran mothers clinging to dying children. Fathers crushed in collapsing space domes. Soldiers laughing as they stood in toxic rain, holding the line. Warlord Zurich Thal saw something he didn't understand. Not strategy. Not weapons. But graves. The choir arc opened. No lights. No blast. Just memories beamed into every node, every circuit, every mind. Footage of the massacre at New Thessalonica. The orbital cities above Mars burning. The moment Earth's moon was struck by a Gorthari test weapon and millions died in silence. Everything the Dominion had tried to bury preserved, enhanced, and returned with unbearable clarity. The entire planet began to shake not from bombardment, but from its own core, melting down under psychic overload. The atmospheric pressure shifted, gravity tilted. Nothing physically changed, and yet everything was breaking. The Dominion forces attempted a last stand. 3 war fleets surged from the planet's shadowed side. They never reached orbit. Human vessels didn't even turn to face them. Dozens of microtears in space opened around the fleet's localized reality distortions, each calibrated precisely to erase propulsion signatures. The ships simply folded in on themselves, not exploded. Unwritten. On the surface, Dominion resistance ignited. Anti-air cannons lit the sky. The last of the ground legions mobilized giant crab-like mechs, psionic lancers, biografted command beasts. The human ground strike followed, not thousands. Just a few hundred. They dropped from orbit, each enclosed in armor that burned atmosphere like comet tails. No insignias, no colors. Just black. The moment they landed, the world changed. No glorious charges. No screens, just precise, calculated advancement. The human soldiers moved like inevitability. Each step was measured. Each movement honed through. Generations of trial by fire. They used no spoken words. Their communications were silent. A neural link passed through quantum networks. Where they walked, domination ended. Gorthari generals tried to engage, only to find their troops paralyzed. Not by weapons, but by something far worse: recognition. They realized, in that moment, what humanity truly was. Not monsters, not saviors. The final mirror. Humanity was what the Gorthari could have been. A species shaped by horror and hardened by history, but who had chosen memory over conquest. They had built arcs of their pain, not to make others suffer, but to make sure no one ever forgot. Warlord Zurich Thal stood in the Grand Palace of Dominion, watching as the capital's shields flickered. They wouldn't, he muttered. They wouldn't destroy us. Not like this. There must be rules. Even the walls began to hum, and then, silence. A single human walked through the palace gates. Unarmed. Helmet in hand. She was young, eyes gray, no rank insignia. Just a patch over her heart. A faded photo of New Thessalonica's skyline. I'm not here to kill you, she said quietly. Zurich Thal trembled. Then what are you here for? She looked around the throne room, then up toward the cracked ceiling and the stars beyond. To make sure this never happens again. Outside, the choir arc rotated. The entire city was swallowed in light, not destruction conversion. The infrastructure remained. The buildings, the libraries, even the people, those who surrendered, remained. But the Dominion? Erased. From language, from symbols. From history. The war was over, and not with conquest, but with an inscription. We asked for peace. You answered with fire. We returned it perfected. And so the galaxy watched. Not as victors rose from ashes, but as witnesses. Because now they understood. Humans didn't conquer planets. They rewrote galaxies. In the centuries that followed, the name Gorthari was never spoken again. Not because it was forbidden, but because there was no longer anyone who dared. The Dominion was gone, not defeated, not exiled, not remembered. Its city stood quiet and preserved. Architectural echoes of arrogance turned into monuments of humility. The species itself had not been wiped out. Survivors remained, but they no longer called themselves Gorthari. They no longer held on to the pride, the conquest, the glory. They lived in silence. In reflection, the galaxy did not cheer. There were no celebration fleets. No parades through the stars. Humanity's victory had not been glorious. It had been terrifying and necessary. On the neutral world of Velthara, once a hub of galactic diplomacy, now more monastery than council, representatives of 100 species gathered in quiet assembly. They came not to judge humanity. They came to understand them. At the center of the chamber stood a single archivist. A human, no armor, no weapons. Just a data slate in hand and a necklace around his neck, a single black ring, the kind once worn by the widows of New Thessalonica. He addressed the room without flourish. We were not the strongest. He began. No claws, no fangs, no hive minds, no advanced evolution, no ancient psionic bloodlines or preternatural senses. He looked up, eyes sharp. But we were the last species in the galaxy that anyone should have made angry. The room said nothing. Some delegates lowered their heads. Others clenched their mandibles or flicked their antennae. Shame carried easily in silence. The archivist continued. You called us volatile, primitive, emotional, dangerous. You were right. A pause. But you forgot that we remember everything. He touched the ring around his neck. The moment Thessalonica burned, we activated Arc Protocol, not as an act of war, but as a promise that if we ever again faced extinction, we would not seek revenge, we would not conquer, we would remind. Murmurs stirred in the room. The representative of the Zorak coalition finally raised a question, his tone cautious. But why? Erase them? Why not leave the Gorthri as a warning? The human smiled, not cruelly, but with deep, endless tiredness. Because warnings fade. He gestured to the star map above them, where once 1,000 systems had carried Dominion flags. Now only empty names hovered, disconnected from the trade routes, the cultures, the memories. We didn't erase the Gorthri because we hated them. We erased them because the galaxy needs a scar. Not a statue. Not a cautionary tale wrapped in diplomacy. A scar that never heals. A hush fell over the hall, on the worlds that survived. In the ruins of Gorthri Prime, new languages were emerging. Survivors adopted Terran customs. Former warlords now taught history to children who asked why their species no longer fought. And in every human city, from Mars to Europa, from the floating capitals of Alpha Centauri to the deep forest worlds of Sanctuary, a phrase was etched into stone and steel. We don't speak of them, but we remember. In orbit above Earth, now more fortress than home, the Choir Arc remained docked. No longer active, but not asleep either. Waiting. The eye that ran its core had no name. It required none. It existed as a living archive, constantly updating, constantly preserving, not just data, but the emotional footprint of every moment humanity considered sacred, or dangerous, or worthy of vigilance. It had one directive: never again without consequence. In a quiet chamber deep within the Ark, a new room had been added. It bore no lights, no screens, just silence and a single chair. Each year, one child selected randomly from the human colonies would sit in it. No instructions, no lectures, just sit and remember. Some would cry. Others would scream. Most would simply sit in silence, awash in generations of rage, pain, and resilience. They would return home changed, because the lesson was never spoken. It was felt. Back on Velthara, the human archivist finished his address. We were never the monsters, he said, voice quiet, but we became what monsters fear. He looked around the room. Do not fear us. Learn from us. Build with us. Trade with us. Love us if you have the courage. Another pause. But never again try to make us angry. He bowed his head, turned, and left the hall. No applause followed, only breathless silence, because in that moment, every species present understood a truth far older than any civilization. Humanity had not merely survived. They had transcended vengeance. They had turned grief into doctrine, and the galaxy would never forget it. On distant worlds, songs were written not about humanity's power, but about their memory. The name Gorthari was banned not by law, but by fear, not of humans, but of what humans became when they had nothing left to lose. And in the dark places of the cosmos, where whispers still lingered and old warlords schemed in the shadows, there were always stories of the Black Choir, of the ARKS of Earth, and its last colony that vanished in fire and silence, and one line that no being in the galaxy ever dared forget. The last species to make humans angry vanished, and we don't speak of them.